Let me ask you something, Peter. Why are you known as the Einstein of Biblical Prophecy? Do you really feel that you've earned that title?
Oh, without a doubt, yes. And here's where it started. It didn't just start, yesterday. I didn't just do a YouTube video and say, "Oh, I'm the Einstein of Biblical Prophecy." I'm actually the first one that I know of that started looking at the Bible through scientific eyes. And this didn't. I started asking questions at the age of 1965. And it was after I had to know how I got a chance to see the future and then live through exactly what I had seen. And I turned to science to find those answers. I literally grew up with the Bible in one hand and a test tube in the other, literally. And it wasn't until until a class of metaphysics came out that opened up the door and gave me the answers. But the fact is that our sciences, and it's not just learning any one science, it's learning multiple sciences. And I'm not saying that I'm an expert in every science that's out there, but it's learning the basics and the principles of this and then understanding how to apply it to Scripture. My professional career went into the sciences. I actually went into a research and development end of a very well-known business. I'm not going to plug them, but they are world-known, and I worked in one of the best laboratories in the United States for just about 10 years. And it was while working for this company that I happened to be reading the book of Job, and a thought came to me. And it was, if the Bible was written for our time, there has to be scientific proof. And so what I started to do is, I had already had 15 years of biblical education and not religious. I never learned religious doctrine or dogma. I was always told that never get involved in religion. It's a scam. And now we find out why. But it was in history and prophecy. It was in history and prophecy. That was what my whole education was centered around. And so now I'm thinking, okay, as a scientist, I know miracles don't exist. So let's take a look at the Bible right from the beginning, and let's look for scientific explanations. Because, I also grew up in the world where you've got evolution on one side and creation on the other side, and I'm sitting in the middle of the table looking at the fossil record and looking at what the Bible says, and I'm saying, well, the Earth is, this galaxy, or say this universe, is supposed to have taken 15 billion years to get to this point. This book says, well, let's see, it doesn't really give us a clue. Because we don't know how long it took for Genesis chapter 1 to happen. I mean, Genesis 1:1 to happen. It said, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Did it take 15 billion years? Yep, many have, because when you go on and read, now things start to happen on earth. When we look back at the fossil record, the first thing that starts to happen on earth, Nigeria. So back to force, move to and fro over the watery deep. Something happened to take this RNA and DNA, which was being created by, interestingly enough, volcanic activity underwater. Yeah, scientists have found out that when they pour water onto hot rock lava or hot pumice, they start getting very simple compounds of RNA and DNA. So that active force, whatever it was, an energy force, went to and fro over the watery deep, and life started. It started in the means of cyanobacteria and extremophiles, and for at least 1 billion years. But now scientists are saying, well, with extremophiles, it could be 3 billion years now. Nothing existed but simple single-cell life forms. The most complicated life forms at the end of the Precambrian era was jellyfish. Basically, that was the most complex life form, jellyfish. And then all of a sudden you get the Cambrian era, and there's an explosion of life on this planet that's never existed since. The variety of life is so vast that we have only had extinction-level events since the Cambrian era. And that's why you can find 6-foot clam shells actually they're oyster shells, up on the side of Mount Everest. Got 16,000 feet above sea level or something like that. Yeah, 6 foot. How the heck did they get up there? They had to be under the watery deep at one time. How about that? So now we start to see evidence of this within creation itself, especially when the command is given Let the oceans swarm with life or life forms. I forget exactly how it's worded, but let the grasses shoot forth on the plains. We look at how the earth was formed itself, and all of these things come together. If you do not have a scientific knowledge knowledge of science, you could never decode the Bible and start to understand this. If I didn't have a knowledge of genetic engineering, how could I ever turn around and figure out that Genesis chapter 2, verse 21 through 23 was genetic engineering? It was a holy mystery by the church. Oh, God opened up the flesh and he took a rib out and he built a woman from it. We don't know how he did it. It's genetic engineering. It doesn't take rocket scientists. It takes genetic engineers to do this. And we can do it today. We have the technology to play God. We have had it since the 1960s. I remember as a teenager listening to a talk given by geneticists on how to draw the guidelines up and what was constituted as playing God and what wasn't. This was debated for quite a while. I remember watching this on TV of all places back in the late 60s, and I'm listening to their argument. I think it was on PBS or something like that, where they actually showed this, kind of like watching what Congress is doing now, and I'm thinking, they shouldn't be doing this. They shouldn't be doing this. Guidelines were never drawn up. A genetic engineer has free will to genetically engineer whatever he wants. There are no laws in place. Yes, the United States does have laws in using stem cells from fetuses, but up until those laws were put into place, you couldn't use that either for genetic engineering. So now that had to be invented before you could understand before we could have any concept that Genesis 2:21 through 23 was genetic engineering. So what else happens? Well, guess what? It takes eons, it seems like, from the time genetic engineering was figured out in the 1960s until they finally figured out string theory in the late 1990s. Bang, string theory. What a fantastic theory that is. String theory gives birth to M theory, which gives birth to superstring theory, and I'll explain this. And in the most simplest form, this didn't happen until the 1990s, late 90s. As a matter of fact, Dr. Mikio Kaku, a gentleman who I've had the acquaintance of meeting and talking to and helping find God in kind of an esoteric and scientific way, we talked a year later. He found God through tachyons. Glad I could help, Doctor. String theory. String theory simply states that all energy is made up of a particle known as string, and it can be either linear or circular, and it is preset to vibrate at a certain speed. So inside the atom itself, there's a tiny, 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 tiny little piece of energy, like putting a battery in your car that starts the car vibrating, and it keeps it vibrating. And so water is water because it vibrates. The hydrogen and oxygen molecules vibrate at a specific speed, and when they get together, they make water. Lead is lead because it vibrates at a specific speed. Uranium and cesium and plutonium and all those other deadly things that are burning up in the Fukushima meltdown are all have their components vibrating at a specific speed, which gives them their characteristics. Change the vibration, you change the molecule. It's just that simple. But we don't have the technology, or so we're told. Yeah, if you could change the vibration of the string inside the atom, you could change that element, whatever it is. And in the case of a meltdown, you hit it with the beam that changes the actual vibration of the string, and this is the God particle that we now know exists. You change that vibration, and you do away with all the radiation instantly. How about that? Just change the vibration. And that's the very basic of building blocks. Now, what else comes out of string theory is string theory states that we don't live in a three-dimensional world. We live in a 10-dimensional multiverse plus the dimension of time, which is a variable across all of the other dimensions. Here's an example. If you traveled at the speed of light from here to Alpha Centauri and come back, it'll take you 4.4 years. However, by the time you got back, your children would have gotten old and died, and your grandchildren would be old people themselves, but you will have only aged a little over 4 years. Why? Because time for you slows down as you approach the speed of light, which means once you're traveling faster than the speed of light, which they say is impossible to do. No, it's not. Our thoughts travel faster than the speed of light, and so do tachyons. Our thoughts are instantaneous. And so when we can think of traveling, all we have to do is think of the location that we want, and consciously we can focus our attention there. Right now, I can focus my attention on a place halfway around the world. I've been there several times. I can see it clear as day just as I'm talking here. And, it's just where we focus our consciousness. And that is actually what is made in the image of God. Now, here's the interesting thing. We don't live in dimensions 1, 2, 3. We live in dimensions 8, 9, 10. As a matter of fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, the dimensions that we don't see or know exist, actually, if they didn't exist, we couldn't. But dimensions 1 through 7 can exist totally fine by themselves without having 8, 9, and 10 around. In other words, our physical universe can totally vanish. And those other dimensions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, would be fine just by themselves. However, they need to exist before we need to exist. So we are essentially, our universe is what you could call the physical body of God. The physical body of Yahweh, Yahuwah, Jehovah. And that's where we reside. How did we figure this out? Oh, there's a little thing that they invented called fractal science. It used to be fractal technology. But now, here's an interesting thing. M-theory, which came out of string theory because you had 4 groups of mathematicians all working on the same problem. They approached it from different directions and all got the same answer. And then it took them further on to M-theory. M-theory says that our little universe here, the dimension in which we live, was created by the touching of 2 membranes. That's why it's called M-theory. Each dimension is a membrane. And when these membranes touch, there is an electric discharge that they say created our universe. So it wasn't the Big Bang. It was an electrical discharge from the 2 membranes touching and colliding. Kind of like, when you rub your feet across the carpet in the winter and then you touch somebody on the nose, you shock them. Or, you go in the wintertime. I had a car that used to shock me all the time. Oh, I couldn't touch that car without getting shocked. But anyway, only in the winter, though, and the air was nice and dry. Interesting thing, this shock, the event horizon as it's called, takes about 1 trillion years from the alpha, as in Revelation where it says, I am the alpha and the omega. Before me nothing existed, and after me nothing will exist. This shock, the big, but is what we used to think was the Big Bang, lasts 1 trillion years, and we're only 15 billion years into it. Now, think about that. 15 billion years into a trillion-year journey. Seriously? God's a teenager. Think about it. If we lived to be 100 and we were 15 years old, well, actually 1,000 in this case because it's 1 billion years, which is interesting. 1,000 Earth years is 1 God day or 1 cosmic day. So if Adam lived to Methuselah, the oldest person on Earth, 969 years is what he was recorded at. So he fell short of a cosmic day or a God day. Adam, I think, was 939, 36, something like that. I have to go back and look. So they fell short of that God day. So if they were to live, let's use fractal science here. If a human was supposed to live for 1,000 years in an imperfect state, 1 God day, then if he only reached 15, it would be a teenager with another 985 years to go. When we look at the cosmos, under M theory, and what science has told us about the age of the universe itself, we're on a 15 billion year journey to, actually a trillion year journey, and we've only used up 15 billion years of it. Where are we going to be another billion years or 2 billion years or 100 billion years or 900 billion years from now? You see, that's where the other event horizon is. And so here's where M theory, comprehending M theory and looking at biblical scripture, turns around and says, the alpha, the omega, event horizon to event horizon. It's a trillion years long, and we're 15 billion years into it. We got a long ways to go. Let's go on. Where else do we go? Einstein of Biblical Prophecy. Which one of your listeners can give me any kind of advice on any sort of this technology that we need to comprehend the scriptures? Excuse me for shouting, but I just want to make a point. You see, yes, well-deserved Einstein of Biblical Prophecy. Because give me somebody else who can turn around and point to the prophecies and say, look, this is what we can expect based on what we know. And how do we know it? Because we have to study the sciences to unlock what's written there. Once we understand what's written there, then we know. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work was done with it, based on Edgar Cayce's work. Edgar Cayce is hailed as the greatest psychic of America in the 20th century. And Edgar Cayce said, everybody can do just what I do. He was a good old Southern boy. And it took a special man by the name of Jose Silva to figure it out. He applied science into what Edgar Cayce did, and he came up with a formula on how we can actually become more conscious. We can develop our consciousness. And so we don't go into a state of unconsciousness. We just go to a different state of conscious. And that's where we learn about beta, alpha, theta, and delta waves. And once you understand what happens in each set of those states that our brain can enter and what our abilities are, that takes us to the next level. And so then string theory and M theory and superstring theory all come into play, because now you can comprehend at the theta conscious state that, guess what? The laws of the third dimension no longer apply to you. At least not to your consciousness. And you can go to any place in time, forward or backward, in any dimension, and visualize or see whatever it is that you need to go look at. Yes, very possible. It's the God connection. And we can train our consciousness. It's not a secret. Go out and take a class. Go buy some CDs. I don't generally endorse anybody, but go look up Silva Ultramind System and go listen to the CDs, or go find out where their local class is, and learn to use your mind, your conscious mind, not just the jelly between your ears, but your actual consciousness. I took the class in 1978. It gave me great insight. It was the best class I'd ever taken on anything. And it gave me insight on, hey, you get to a problem, guess what? Go to a different conscious level and look at the problem from a different consciousness, and you'll find the answers you're looking for. And so when I get to a biblical scripture that I'm not sure about, or a prophecy I'm not sure about, I start thinking about it. That's what I was doing when this all started. I was reading the book of Job, as I mentioned earlier, and it was the 38th chapter, verses 20, I believe, 20 through 22. And God says to Job, have you seen my storehouses of snow and ice, which I have saved for the day of distress and war? And I'm thinking, what the heck did Job know about storehouses of snow and ice? He lived in the Middle East, approximately around where the border of India and Pakistan are, somewhere in that general area. And so I actually said, okay, let's go do this simple exercise. I went into a state of meditation. I went down to theta, did my little exercise program, my brain to get down there. And I said, okay, I'm going to open my eyes and I'm going to see what Job saw in my mind's eye. And so now I'm looking through the eyes of Job, and I'm looking at a very nice subtropical area, and I can see up, toward the mountaintops that there's a little snow up there, but not much. And I'm saying, well, that can't be storehouses, one mountaintop full of snow. So I start elevating myself, looking at the earth. It's like I'm leaving planet Earth in my own mind's eye. And mind you, my brain is actually operating somewhere between 4 and 8 hertz at this. What you would consider a sleep state, or essentially in the theta state of mind. And I'm looking at the earth, and I'm getting further and further away from it. And it dawns on me, oh, there's the storehouses. Stupid, it's on the poles, Antarctica and the Arctic Circle. Of course, that's where the snow is stored. And so I said, okay, I'm thinking, how do you use this as a weapon? What are the principles of snow and ice? And I start seeing the ice caps melt, and I start seeing ocean levels rise, and I start seeing earthquakes in one place after another, and I think, the distribution of the mass of Earth. You change the mass from the poles and put it in the center of the Earth, and it starts It starts putting pressure on the tectonic plates, and they start moving around like a jigsaw puzzle that isn't put together. So there you go. And this was 1980. I was in the laboratory at the time waiting for an experiment to finish cooling down, and so it wasn't going anywhere, and I couldn't take it to the next phase until it cooled down. And so that's what I was doing, reading the book of Job, and I did all this, and that's where I calculated that, wait a minute, there's got to be scientific proof. So I started looking for the scientific proof back in 1980, and the proof I needed wasn't invented then. It was the 1990s that we had string theory. It wasn't until, I can't tell you exactly when fractal science became fractal science. Before that, it was fractal technology, but they found it so accurate. And fractal science is the repeating patterns of nature repeating patterns within nature. So if there's life in dimensions 8, 9, and 10, it would only make sense that there would be life in all of the dimensions which are needed to support us. But now we can't see those dimensions. How do we know they're there? Because the mathematics tells us if they're not there, we are not here. And then we find out that, we're just basically a hard hologram anyway. We're all made up of photons at the basic level. Light energy. So it's interesting. There's so many different theories that are out there. Just look at the atom itself. 1 part solid for 4 million parts of empty space. I think that was right. 4 million parts. Let's hope so. It's either 4 million or 4 trillion. But regardless, there's a lot of empty space within an atom. So we're really not there. We're really not there. What makes us be able to interact with everything are electrons. Electrons allow us to touch and feel. Interesting thing about electrons, they can be in 2 places at the same time. Quantum mechanics. Oh yeah, you got to learn that too. So you can at least have a comprehension of how all of this works. So yeah, I think that Einstein of Biblical Prophecy is pretty accurate, wouldn't you say, Russell?